Today is Monday the 25th of July 2016. This is Krzyżtopór in southeastern Poland. It's approximately 40 kilometers or thereabouts northwest of Sandomierz. And I just spent the night here. It was a very pleasant place to spend the night. The views of the castle, it wasn't illuminated last night, although there are lights there. Which I can see that, so maybe there was a reason why it wasn't. Isolated to a certain extent, although I could hear the sounds of animals. I could hear some animal outside, maybe it was just a cat or a dog walking around, I don't know, because I couldn't see it. But in the morning, get all the noises from the farms, such even heard pigs squealing this morning. This castle is said to have been the largest palace, because it really is a palace. It's a fortified palace. It dates to the beginning of the 17th century, and it's said to have been the largest palace in Europe until the construction of Versailles. Now, it's very difficult to say what makes a size of a palace, because do you measure this by cubic meters, do you measure by square meters, do you include the gardens? The gardens here are only approximately well, there's not much of them, as you'll see, 1.6 hectares, whereas Versailles, it's more than 800 hectares. So that would put it into the context. I mean, certainly as well, it doesn't look any bigger than, for example, Windsor Castle. If we were to take the case of Poland, I'd say that, for example, Malbork Castle is certainly bigger. But Malbork was built as a castle, not so much as a palace. As you can see, these are certainly walls which were built for defence, and you can't really get much of an impression from down here, but if you see it in an aerial view or on a map, you'll get a much better idea. So let's have a walk around the castle first. And it's very much as though it's sort of lost in the countryside here. And despite its size, I don't think it's a particularly well-known castle. Okay, today is a Monday morning, so there's quite a few cars for 10 o'clock on Monday morning. And yesterday was Sunday, and it's a bit difficult for me to park. Easy with a car, but with a van, there's many places you can't actually use. The weather, it's 28 degrees, which is normal for this time of year in Poland. I'd like to also point out, even walking down here, it is absolutely well out in the countryside, but you can see there is a cycle path. And the greenways system has been very well developed in eastern Poland, and so you can travel by bicycle. I was at a press conference, and this is what the plan was said, but I think it's now been actually done, from the northern Russian border to the Slovakian border. Maybe there's a bit of an exaggeration on that, but there you go, a cycle path out here in what can almost be described as just about the middle of nowhere. With all due respect to everybody living around here, of course. Now, I'm be going later, today or tomorrow, to Opatów, which I've only driven past before, but it's sort of, I've been meaning to go there now for a very long time, ever since reading Samuel Willenberg's book Revolt in Treblinka, which I first read about 23 years ago. Now, the village here is called Ujazd, and the castle was founded by one Krzysztof Ossoliński. Now, I was also in a place called Klimontów. Now, somebody in his family founded the church there and the monastery there. And you can see that in another film. I was there yesterday. In fact, I spent the weekend there. and it was built in stages over almost a 30-year period. Thing is, it's in this state of disrepair because there was the Swedish invasions in the middle of the 17th century, so it had only just been finished by the time that got destroyed, and then it was once again seriously damaged in the 1772 war, or sort of a civil war really in Poland, but also there was the intervention in this case of Russia on one of the sides within the civil war, and that led to the state it's in now. Now, there have been several attempts actually to do it up, and there are repairs which occurred. The most recent of which was not that long ago. It was in 1981, and turn it into a site for officers. So the officers would come here, have a bit of rest and recreation, but when martial law occurred, that plan was shelved, and since then nothing else has happened. Here we have a grave, or a place to recall where people were murdered in 1944. So there we have the date, June 1944. 10 Poles were murdered on this spot. June 1944, this area was liberated, fell into Soviet hands, changed occupant a few weeks after that killing took place. And we get these signs all over Poland recalling what happened during the occupation. And I did a film yesterday on Klimontu where I explain why the population is 1/3 what it was 100 years ago. So we have this round tower, but below it what appears to be some type of summer house with this water feature outside. So it's illogical. If this is for defence, then you understand the high walls, high thick walls, although by the time it was built such walls were becoming a bit out of date, particularly if they're going straight up. If they were sort of sloped at an angle, it was a bit different. But outside there's these facilities here for enjoying oneself in summer. So it is a little bit illogical. But that must have been what Mr. Ossoliński wanted. So let's have some statistics on this. The castle itself takes up 70,000 cubic meters. It's on a 1.3 hectare site, 600 meters circumference of the walls, and the walls themselves are 3,730 square meters. The gardens, so where I'm standing now, 1.6 hectares, and constructed something of the order of over 12,000 tons of sandstone and other materials were needed. Now, it was said to be so luxurious inside that even the horses would drink from marble troughs, and used a great deal of marble, alabaster and wood, which didn't come from here, exotic wood. And so this more or less completes the tour around the outside of the castle, because my van is now parked up there on the left. So let's have a look at it from the inside. There's the date, 1631. Very similar time to when the large church and the abbey were made. Clermont-Auve, not so far from here, which also happened at the beginning of the 17th century. The W, the Mr. Ossoliński, who did this place, was rather superstitious, and that has some kind of magical or superstitious significance. This whole palace has been built around a calendar motif. So it's got what we'd call today, I suppose, 12 suites, 52 rooms, 365 windows. Now, Mr. Ossoliński died 1 year after this was completed, and from there to the moment of its destruction by the Swedes was only around 11 years, something like that. Perhaps it's just as well he didn't live long enough to see it destroyed. His son died in the Khmelnytsky uprising, which was in the Ukraine, and his son died childless. Whereas I appreciate that this was built largely privately. Mr. Ossoliński, Krzysztof Ossoliński, he was the voivoda of Sandomierz, so much of this money must have come from public funding, as such as it existed in the 17th century. I can imagine what good could have been done if the resources used to make this 11-year lasting castle could have been put into public projects such as housing, which of course didn't really exist then, or roads, or infrastructure, supplying water, where we would be today in terms of human development. And I just use this as one example because you've got examples throughout the world when the powers that be built castles and magnificent palaces and churches and did nothing for people. Oh, keep going down here. Gate at the end. I think I'll walk around the easy route. So that's where I've come out if I follow the underground passage. Now this is the official route, But, you know, it's not really suitable for older people. Or those with physical difficulties. Having said that, it is a ruined castle, what does one expect? And the price of 10 zloty to get in, you can't expect too much, I suppose. This is the round tower, which we saw from outside, and on the other side is the summer house. And it says that this is the way to the spring. Use the word right, wellspring, which in English doesn't make much sense, but in Polish, as the word it does. This may have been the back entrance once. If so, that would have been the way to the summer house. But not much good in the case of a siege. Another warning is that the floor is pretty slippy in here. In many ways, it's like when you go into a ruin, which is a wild ruin. I do appreciate that this has been a tourist attraction only for a relatively short time, and that there's huge amounts of work to be done here. Possibly building walkways and what have you, and the money for that is not available. Absolutely appreciate that. Here you get a bit of an idea of the shape of the fortifications. We've also got a ditch here, which is very clear, but not a ditch at the bottom. And that's where I spent the night. So now I'm going to move on. I'll say of the experience I had here, perhaps the most interesting actually was stopping the night here. This is a very nice place to stop. Now I am going to move on to Opatów. I'd say that around here is some good cycling. Not so other people are doing that. So if you're interested in more of these films, see my site www.motorhomefulltime.com or YouTube site.
Ty dzwoniła Halina dzisiaj do ciebie? No właśnie do mnie też nie.